I've seen this question a lot, all over Reddit writing subs, social media, and even in my emails. How do I get started writing? And I'm sure you saw this coming, but there's no easy answer. If you want to write, you just have to write. But I realize that's unhelpful. So I want to give you a little motivation and a couple of actionable steps. Hi, hello, welcome in. I'm Jerica, and I'm an editor, writer, and all-around content creator, and today I'm here to instill in you the confidence to begin your writing journey. The blank page can be daunting to us all, but especially so if it's your first blank page. So let's talk about how you can start getting some words on the page. Because everyone can write. Now, can everyone write a flawless story the first time they sit down? Of course not! I'd suggest that nobody can, even with years of experience. Their stories may be better than the first time they sat down, but most of writing is actually editing. So the first piece of advice I have is to just get some words on the page. We're going to talk about ways to help with that, but this sentiment is key to writing your short story, novel, memoir, essay, whatever it is. A perfect first draft doesn't exist, and you can't edit what isn't written. Before we get into any actual writing or skill building, I'd like you to consider what's actually stopping you from writing. Is it a lack of ideas and you just have this desire to write a story? Is it a fear of failure? You think maybe nobody will like my story or nobody will even read it? Is it doubt in your ability to write well? You aren't really sure that you have a grasp of grammar and clarity and pretty prose? Tackling these underlying factors is going to get you started writing way faster than pretty much any other trick. A lot of what stops us from doing anything is more a mental block than our actual ability to do. And so let's look at how to tackle a couple of those common reasons why we just can't get started. If the main thing blocking you is that you're unsure that you can write well, rest assured that you don't have to write well the first time around. But it might help you boost your confidence to do some skill building and exercises. Just because we know the first draft won't be perfect doesn't mean that we can't try to work on those skills and make the first draft the best first draft it can be. Reading is one of the best ways to do this, and there are two ways that I suggest you go about it. One is to read books about the craft, and the second is to read books in your genre at the length that you'd like to write. My assumption is that you've considered books about the craft already, if not having already read some, because that's kind of where our mind always first goes when we want to learn to do something new, is to read about it or watch videos about it like you're doing right now. But I want to make sure that you're using some critical thinking to really get the most out of this that you can. Because while it's great to understand the broad strokes of writing well and all of the grammar rules and things like that, writing best practices, we also know that pros break the rules all of the time, and so analyzing how they do that can be really helpful. And that you can do in these self-help books or these reference books, but I'd suggest it's far better and more helpful in something that is going to be similar to what you plan on writing. I want to be clear that I don't want you to stop reading for pleasure. You shouldn't analyze every book you read this way, but every so often I'd like you to pick up a book that's similar to what you'd like to write and truly think about how it's been written. And think about it from both a writing perspective and a reader's perspective. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, from a writer's perspective, I want you to consider all of the writing rules that you know and look for them in the writing. And look for where they've been broken. And then also consider if you like the way that those turn out, whether they're being followed or broken. As a reader, I want you to think more about the experience of reading it. think about every time that you read something and it really makes you feel something, try to find how the writing managed to execute that. Think about the important pieces of your genre. So if you want to write mysteries and you're reading mysteries, think about how the narrative is dropping breadcrumbs about each of the clues. If you're reading and therefore writing horror, take a look at how they're building the tension, what parts you feel, terrified in, and how that's being executed. When you're reading as a writer, you're looking at the words themselves, and when you're reading as an analytical reader, you're looking more at the experience of the reader, and both of these things are really important to figure out how to execute them in your own writing. And the really key point here is thinking about what you like and dislike about each of the stories. That way you can find your own style and voice when you go to write your own. There is one other thing that you can do when it comes to reading in your genre, and that is to do what's called copy work. At some point I'd like to do a deep dive into this, but this is simply copying out word for word what is on the page. Obviously, you're not going to be using this in your piece. This is kind of a study of the language, and it's getting your brain to think about the structure of the sentences. So it's not just copying, it's like mindfully copying. This next thing that you can do is best if you're struggling with idea generation or simply fear of writing and the blank page, and you really just need to get some words on the page, but you're not ready to jump into your story quite yet. Start by writing something else. Even if you have an idea, it's clear that you're not ready for it. You need to get used to the act of writing instead. You need to boost your confidence in your abilities. And my favorite way of doing this is to do low stakes, time-pressured, writing prompt-based sprints. Now, maybe that made sense to you, maybe it was just word goo. Basically what it means is you're going to choose a writing prompt. There's loads of ways to find these. I have a bunch linked down below for ease of finding one. But you're going to pick that prompt. You're going to not think about it at all. You're just going to set a timer. I suggest between 5 and 20 minutes, but it's really up to you. And you're going to write. You're not going to think, you're not going to outline, you're just going to put words on the page. What makes this low stakes is that the intent of these words isn't to create a finished and polished piece. It's to experiment with your voice. It's to experiment with POV, with genre, with theme, with getting kind of silly with it. I actually did a challenge recently where for 31 days I wrote every day using a different prompt during Inktober, and it was really fun to just experiment with weird stuff, and some of those ideas ended up being nuggets of gold, and some of them were absolutely terrible. And the best part about it is that I never felt bad about it, because the only goal I had was to sit down and write. It wasn't to create a beautiful piece of writing. And so I recommend you really keep these low stakes. If you are the kind of person that can do this, I can't, but if you can write it and delete it. That way you never even have to think about it again. It was just about getting some words on the page. It was just about the act of writing, the act of creating, the act of thinking about a narrative. But, on the other hand, it's possible that you'll come up with something you love and you will want to keep going, so make sure you can save it later, even if your intention is to delete it. This is something that I did in my creative writing courses in college, and every day, without fail, my instructor would say, this is the prompt, write for this long, and then at the end she'd say, if you want to share it, share it. And now, if you want to get rid of it, rip it out of your paper, hit backspace, get rid of it. It was very freeing to be able to do that. I never got rid of any of them because I'm kind of the mindset of I want to keep everything I've written, even if it's absolute garbage. because, I don't know, it's kind of like part of the journey, I guess. Something else that can be really helpful to just like get some words on the page and maybe motivate you to actually do it is to use co-working or body doubling. And while it's great to do this live, I'll run some every so often. It's also perfectly fine to use videos that are already up. I have a couple that I think are great for co-working, but you can find live streams doing co-working, or you can it doesn't have to be somebody else writing either. There are lots of like chore alongs and things like that, and so having somebody else working while you're working can be very motivating if you haven't tried that before. Hopefully by now you've gained some confidence and you're ready to start your story. You came to this video either with an idea or at least a very passionate desire to write a story, and it's time to actually do that. But there's one step that you can do in between having that idea and getting words on the page. I'm talking about an outline. Sometimes organizing your thoughts is something that you really need to do before you can actually get started. Because the overwhelm of holding all of the scenes and plot ideas that you've had in your head can stop you from focusing on the scene that you need to write right now. Talking about exactly how to outline is a little too big for this video, but rest assured that there's a video and a blog post coming, and I actually have a blog post up on another website right now that you can reference, which is down in the description. But basically, you're going to want to think about the timeline of your story, the scenes that need to go into it. Checking out my video or blog post on story structure could prove very helpful for figuring out your exposition, inciting incident, rising action, climax, falling action, and resolution. That's a really good way to think about the outline of a story. But it's not the only way. However, there are multiple types of writers, and not everybody likes or works with outlines. There's kind of this spectrum between discovery writers and pure outliners, and I myself generally fall somewhere in the middle. And so, rather than an outline, perhaps a brain dump would be more helpful. It still allows you to get all of those thoughts out on the page so that you don't have to hold them in your mind, but it's less organized and constraining. Very often, when it comes to my writing, I do a brain dump and then organize it into a more structured outline if I feel the need to do so. But you can definitely leave it as the chaotic mess if it works for you. The greatest thing about having some sort of outline or brain dump or notes about your story is that your page is no longer blank. You can think about that as the first page or pages of your story. You could even keep it in the same document or notebook if you want. This is kind of the low effort start to your stories so that you can jump into the actual scenes. This brain dump thing that I do is often very chaotic, and it may be ugly, but that's fine because you're the only one who needs to see it. It's a reference document, not something to show the world. So don't worry about it. But what it all comes down to is eventually you have to just start writing. You can read all the books about the craft, and you can analyze all the books in your genre. You can do 1,000 writing sprints. You can practice your grammar as much as you want. But eventually you have to just start writing. At some point, all of these studies and exercises become productive procrastination techniques. If you want to write a story, you need to write a story. There's no quick fix or one-size-fits-all manual to writing a novel or a short story or a memoir or whatever you're writing. We all have our own obstacles to overcome as we start and finish the first and many other drafts. Consider setting yourself some writing goals and or joining a writing community in order to have some sort of framework and a place of motivation as well as commiseration. Feel free to share your struggles and ask for advice, especially if you feel like your particular block wasn't covered in this video. I'd love to try to help you out if I do happen to have some advice. And I encourage everyone else to help each other in the comments as well. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this has helped. I had a blast. Catch you next time. Bye.